One of the most urgent tasks for our country is to decisively defeat the climate hysteria hoax.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday, and this is the best day of the week. Not just because the weekend is almost here, but because this is the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm Executive Vice President of Heartland. The Heartland Institute is an organization that has been around for 42 years and is known as the leading global think tank pushing back on climate alarmism. Heartland and this show bring you the data, the science, the truth that counters the climate alarmist narrative you've been fed every single day of your life. There is nothing else quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere. So I hope you will bring friends to view this live stream every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern time, and also like, share, and subscribe. And be sure to leave your comments underneath this video about the stuff we talk about. These all convince YouTube's mysterious algorithm to smile upon this program, and that gets it in front of even more people. And as a reminder, because big tech and the legacy media are not big fans of the way we cover climate and energy on this program, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to support us, and I really hope you do, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. And you can make a tax-deductible donation with other fans of this program who help bring it to the world every single week. And before we get started, we want to thank our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFACT, well, What's Up With That, the CO2 Coalition, and Heartland UK Europe. We have a packed show and a packed house today. So let's get started. We have with us, as usual, Anthony Watts, Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute and publisher of the world's most viewed website on climate change, What's Up With That? We have Sterling Burnett, the Archbishop of Canterbury, whose day job is being the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute. We have Linnea Lueken, Research Fellow for Energy and Environment Policy at Heartland, and our producer extraordinaire, Andy Singer, behind the scenes, making this show flow great. And we're so happy to welcome back a regular on this program, Lois Perry. She's the director of Heartland UK Europe. She's fighting the good fight against net zero here, there, and everywhere. Lois, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Great. Now, you just you did a special event, kind of a last-minute request, just this morning or this afternoon in the UK, but this morning here in the United States, and we're going to get to that in a little bit. So stay tuned, everybody. It was let's just say it was 4-on-1, and it was not fair to the 4 against Lois Perry's 1.
Thank you. Thank you.
On net zero. All right. So look forward to that. But we will get started, as we do every week, by covering the crazy climate news of the week. Hit it, Andy. Thank you very much, Bill Nye. Well, you may have heard, it was actually on this day a week ago, Paul Ehrlich died at the age of 93. Now, we need to talk about that. Paul Ehrlich was probably the most destructive public intellectual in history. He advocated for reducing the global population down to very few people, and he obliged by reducing the population by 1, being himself. Paul Ehrlich was spectacularly wrong on every prediction that he made. I contend that he was actually a very truly nasty and even evil man, yet he was depressingly influential, especially on the left and the environmental left. Andy, if you could put up, there's a slide there. Here's our friend Michael Mann commenting on Paul Ehrlich's passing. He says, "Oh, very sad news. Paul was a friend and a hero, and he will be greatly missed." No, Paul Ehrlich was not a hero. Maybe he'll be missed, but just crazy. But his influence on environmental policy is almost too much to overstate. He basically he wrote The Population Bomb in the year 1968. It was an enormously popular book. He was probably the most celebrated public intellectual of the 1970s, among them for sure, when we had public intellectuals out in the popular culture. But he helped to institute into the environmental movement a hatred of human beings. The environmental movement today believes, like Paul Ehrlich did, that humans are a plague upon the earth, and there needs to be at least several billion fewer of us alive in order for the planet to survive. Paul Ehrlich wanted forced sterilization. He advocated for the starvation of hundreds of millions of people in India, calling for food aid to be cut off to them in the late 1960s. Every country on earth was going to starve, he said, in The Population Bomb. The very first line in his book is, "The battle to feed all of humanity is over." 100% wrong. Andy, if you could put up this chart, and Anthony Watts may also refer to this because he wrote a post on it on What's Up With That. But the exact opposite of what Paul Ehrlich predicted happened. Death and famine dropped almost immediately after he made that claim to now where it's almost completely eradicated.
That's like Al Gore would say it, it's just like the hurricane drought right after Al Gore says we're going to have worse hurricanes.
Exactly. So he did serve a purpose in that regard, if anybody was actually looking at his claims and comparing actual data to it. We have a video clip that I'd like to play. This was him, again, this was from 1970. Paul Ehrlich was probably America's most prominent public intellectual. And again, there were talk shows back in the day that would put such people on the air for everyone to experience. This gives you a sense of his outlook on humanity and the world. Could you play that, please, Andy?
Given the population explosion, let alone in this country, what ought the government to do about this?
Well, what it ought to do is this. The first thing, you don't want to put, I'm against government interference in our lives. You want to minimize that. So the very first thing the government should do is try and take the pressure off to reproduce. There's a lot of pressure in our society now to reproduce. If you're single, people try and push you into getting married. Your wife, you have a bachelor over and your wife says, gee, shouldn't I have a nice girl over? The idea is, nobody should escape. So there's pressure to get married. Young couples, if they don't have children, people say, gee, they must be sterile. They never say, gee, maybe they like good wine and going to the theater and so on. They prefer that to scraping diapers. So there's pressure to have children. So the first thing that should happen is that the president ought to say, from here on out, no intelligent, patriotic American family ought to have more than 2 children, preferably 1, if you're starting a family now. Not any law, but just say this is what responsible people do. He ought to make the FCC see to it that large families are always treated in a negative light on television wherever they appear. There ought to be a tremendous amount of television time devoted to spot commercials, the sort we've had against smoking. But the ones in the middle, say in the middle of Beverly Hillbillies, you get a scene which shows Los Angeles in the smog, and it just says this city has a fatal disease. It's called overpopulation, and so long. Now, that sort of campaign, you could have a sample census, which would see whether that was having the desired effect. If that didn't, you could move to giving women bonuses for not having babies. That almost certainly would do the job. If that didn't have the effect, then you could move to changing the tax structure so that people who had the money and had the children paid for the children. In other words, you would increase taxes on people with children rather than decrease them, since when they have the children, they require more services. If that doesn't work, then you'll have the government legislating the size of the family. And people say, oh, that's impossible. Government can never intrude and tell you how many children to have. Well, I got news. It intruded a long time ago and told you how many wives you can have. And there's not the slightest question that if we don't get the population under control with voluntary means, that in the not-too-distant future, the government will simply tell you how many children you can have and throw you in jail if you have too many.
Anthony Watts, they say you should not speak ill of the dead. I will leave it to you whether or not to adhere to that.
Okay, well, he believed everything he said. He truly did. And what was most interesting about it is what happened a couple of years ago. We published this on What's Up With That, and we have a story on What's Up With That right now that is up on the main page talking about it. But when pressed with the issue of being wrong, he actually made a statement that says, well, my work was peer-reviewed in the scientific literature, and therefore it's correct. He was completely disconnected from the reality of the fact that none of his predictions came true, but because they were published in peer-reviewed journals, they had to be right. It just gobsmacking how much disconnect there was in his thinking process.
He was like a lot of intellectuals. He had that PhD behind his name, and he thought that sort of gave him sort of a God's eye or a privileged point of view on not just the things he was supposedly expert in. It's my understanding he was a butterfly expert. So certainly he knew something about human population and extinction of all other species, because he wrote a book called Extinction. He wrote so many books and he was on so many programs. And what was disturbing? So Jim showed something from 50 years ago. He was on 60 Minutes not that long ago. His views never changed. Data, he's supposed to be a scientist. Data and facts never change his points of view. If they were taking, if there was a betting, I know there's lots of betting sites now, but if there were betting sites when I were younger and I was a betting man, I could have made a fortune betting against anything. If Paul Ehrlich said it, you bet against it. And you just clean up, because he was never right. And yet none of the talk shows, none of the news programs, none of the newspapers ever called him out for being wrong. They just said, they kept asking him back as if he'd been right before. He was like he was a lot like a death cult that predicts the end of the world. He sets the date. The end of the world doesn't come, and he just says, "Oh well, it's a few years hence. I made a mistake on the date, but it's still coming. It's a few years hence. It's a few years hence," over and over again.
The parallels. The parallels with how he did his work and the climate change cult are scary, because the climate change people look at the models more than anything. Their models are their guidepost. Oh, well, there's some data over here. Well, no, that doesn't align with the models, so let's not worry about it. And so that's pretty much how Ehrlich was doing it. He would make these projections using whatever models he had, mental or otherwise. And then when data came along that was inconvenient, he would simply ignore it. And the climate folks have been doing the same exact thing. One of the saddest things that was published, and I had this on my post on What's Up With That, was this gentleman who said, I believed what Paul Ehrlich had to say. He took that don't have children thing, to heart. And then he said, well, now I'm older and I have no grandchildren or anything, and I was duped. And I mean, what a sad thing, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Like that slide I had up there. There it is. Yeah. Thank you, Andy. Just speaking about how the media kept taking him seriously. He was on 60 Minutes I think it was 2023. So it was when he was 91 years old. Yeah. And look at this headline. This was the headline from the obituary in the New York Times. His best-selling 1968 book, which forecast global famines, made him a leader of the environmental movement, as we've said. But he faced criticism when his predictions proved premature.
Oh, premature.
He's been wrong about everything for 55 years, almost 60 years. But yeah, go ahead, Lois.
Can I just say my response to that video from having watched it is, boy, does that guy have some issues. Wow. When he talks about people being trapped by marriage or words to that effect, he seems particularly devastated at the prospect of only being able to have one wife. I just feel that obviously he's got some stuff that he needs to work through, but clearly he doesn't need to work it through now, because he's gone to the other side. People like that are rarely religious or have any faith whatsoever. So he's probably a bit shocked at the moment to discover that death is not the end. But that's just my personal belief. As you say, every single prediction that he made did not come true. So, but obviously that doesn't stop these people. They're still listening to people like Al Gore and Michael Mann and others who make extraordinary predictions and give precise dates that never seem to come true, and we know never will. So anyway, I hope he's resting in peace.
Yeah,
a great admirer of the Chinese Communist nation. Because they implemented the kinds of policies that he thought were necessary to save.
Oh, well, that tells me all I need to know about him.
Yeah, so people would actually find this maybe curious or hard to believe, but Joe Bass, the founding president of the Heartland Institute, when we were founded in 1984, he was a crunchy environmentalist hippie. He was an environmentalist in the classic sense back then, where he was an ecologist, and he really thought we needed to do more. In the mid 80s, that we'd already started with EPA in 1970, but we needed to do more to protect the natural environment. And, of course, just like Patrick Moore, who used to be one of the founding members of Greenpeace, left the organization because it became dystopian and anti-human. And the same thing, that's what happened to the environmental movement. It morphed from a movement and ideas to preserve nature into one to destroy humanity. And Linnea is the youngest one of us on this panel, and she came up through school and a culture in which that message, basically because of Paul Ehrlich, was hammered into her brain, in her skull from a very young age, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, he certainly was right, or he was certainly successful if he was trying to get the social pressure to go the other way, right? I grew up in, a culture where families that had more than like 2 or 3 kids were like snubbed and looked down on and made fun of and stuff. People would call them weird or whatever. Or, how are you going to retire when you have that many kids to pay for school for, blah, 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 that kind of thing. So it definitely was successful, which is sick and wrong and bad. Those kinds of policies were obviously very successful in China. Now they're going to pay the price for that. We talked about yesterday on the show how ironic it was that, he starts off in that interview saying, well, I don't want government getting in anyone's lives. But here's the problem of how government is currently in people's lives when it comes to having kids. And then he proceeds to list a bunch of things that have nothing to do with the government. He says, like, parents, are asking, when are you going to have, grandchildren for me? And families are wondering, if there's a couple who doesn't have kids, what's wrong with them, and blah, blah, blah. That's not government. That's just culture. That's just society. And then his prescription for those government influences, those pro-natalist government influences, is a bunch of government stuff. It's a bunch of like, the government needs to pay people to not have kids. The government needs to penalize people who do, and it's just sick all around. It's
restrict television, make large families on TV look bad.
Yeah, and so the thing that Sterling brought up about how he was. Oh, I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought there with the television comment. But because that's totally true too. But he was very successful in all of this stuff. Oh yes. And the reason why they keep bringing it up on television, Sterling, isn't because they think that he's right about, things that have happened in terms of trends of crop production and population and all that stuff. It's because they're wish casting. They're using him to wish cast that those things do happen. They are hoping that there are massive famines and stuff so that they can implement, or they can have this like sense of urgency to implement the policies that they would want to implement anyway. It's the same thing as the climate scam. It all wraps around to the same policies. And we talked about this during COVID too, the coof that we're not allowed to talk about on YouTube. It was so ironic and interesting that all of the same policies that are supposed to keep us safe during COVID are the same things that they want to stop climate change, which is limit transportation, limit what kind of food you eat, all of that stuff. So it's all just tools for the same agenda.
Yeah, it's misanthropes wanting the world to be the way they think it should be, and that the prime among that is there's got to be a lot fewer poor people, a lot fewer poor and middle class. They make good servants, but you don't want to see them on the streets or in the national parks or Yeah.
Yeah.
You certainly don't want them having what you have, access to the kinds of things that you have, shopping in stores and actually buying fruit year round, like you can do now. They just they don't like anyone but their own elite friends, and everyone else should just be servants.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Ehrlich transplanted into the environmental movement was this idea of intellectual egoism, or just this belief that he is right and he and his other peer-reviewed scientists are correct. And so, of course, what they say should happen must happen because I am 100% correct. There's no humility in that at all, let alone moral humility. But notice in that clip, first it's like, well, we'll try telling people not to have as many kids. And then, well, we'll try to bribe them into not having so many kids. And then we'll just punish them lightly if they have too many kids. And then after that, we're going to do forced sterilization because that's the only way to save the planet. It ramps up really, really fast. But that's the way the environmental movement has developed over the last 20, 30 years as well. It started out saying, we should be kind to the environment. We should pick up litter. We should, do all these things that are voluntary. And it has, and through the whole Biden administration, where we had mandates for electric vehicles, because the people are not choosing to live the way our environmental experts tell us we must in order to save the planet. It's the exact same playbook that Paul Ehrlich outlined in 1968.
It's good that you brought that up, Jim. I just read a story today. I posted it somewhere as well, reposted it. So everyone was saying that people really want these electric vehicles. People really want these electric vehicles. Of course, you take the subsidies away. The subsidies aren't that great. It was like a $7,500 tax credit on a 50-something thousand, 60-something $1,000 car. It's a tax credit. So you get it off your taxes. It's not that they're not putting your money in your pocket. It goes away for half a year now, and sales have dropped more than 40%. And it was only the wealthy that were buying it in the first place. The upper two quadrants of income were 90% of the buyers of electric vehicles, and so they didn't need the tax credits. But still, you take the tax credit away, and they ain't buying them.
It's interesting what you say, Jim, about the whole concept of them being absolutely right and we're completely wrong, and therefore we have to do what they say. You'd say that is
in some ways an extreme religious conviction. But what I will say is the other day, Nigel Farage, leader of the Reform Party in this country, tipped to be the next Prime Minister, God willing. Oh no, I shouldn't really say that, should I? But he actually said a lot of people,
they've found climate change. And I think that is actually a good way of summing up the, I'd say it's like medieval religion, a medieval religious fervor that these people have, that they are absolutely right and that we are absolutely wrong and have to do what they say. It is like that.
Yeah. Anthony, did you have one more thing to mention and we can move on?
There was this really, really prescient tweet from Chris March that I posted on WhatsApp with that, where he says, this tweet from Professor Michael E. Mann, very sad news. Paul was a friend and a hero. He will be greatly missed. And Chris says this explains a lot. Well, it does. Jim, you made that point about, Ehrlich defining the environmental movement with the way that he was approaching things, with scientists with ego and we're always right. Well, it's like man is his godchild of this philosophy. Man has an ego, I've often said, so big he can't fit through most doors. And you try to tell man that he's been wrong about something? Oh, no. It's impossible to get through. And so it's I'm not sure what you would call it, but it's the climate movement has very, very strong parallels to what Ehrlich did and talked about.
We need to make being a fan, friend, hero, worshiper of Paul Ehrlich like being a fan, friend of Cesar Chavez now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is why the Climate Realism Show exists. And we actually do like to have fun. This is a bit of a dark subject right now, but we do have fun on this show. which is not something you can say for a lot of environmental leftists. So thanks everyone for being a fan of the show. And we can move on to our second item here today. And that is the poor wolves of Yellowstone. Sterling identified this for us to cover this week. This comes from a website called Green Matters. And it states that Yellowstone wolves see sharp decline in population. Experts say hidden threat is to blame. I bet you can guess what that hidden threat is. Let me read a bit for you. From 123 to merely 90, the wolves of Yellowstone National Park underwent a stark population decline in 2025. According to a new study published in the journal Ecology Letters, the wolves of Yellowstone chew on more bones to cope with climate change. Fossil evidence shows that gray wolves evolved their diets to deal with the warming temperatures. Who figured? Now, climate change has driven them to eat harder foods like bones to meet their nutritional requirements in warmer climates. Climate change is certainly one of the reasons that triggered the massive population decline at Yellowstone, as it reduces prey availability and changes the habitat of the wolves. Skipping a little bit ahead in the story, this same article says this. Wolves are apex predators that play a crucial role in the ecosystem and food web. Their decline would impact the population of larger herbivores like deer, elk, and bison. With fewer predators eating these grazers, they would grow in numbers. I don't know. It seems like that's nature's working itself out. And one last thing, by the way, this very same publication, Green Matters, back in November, just a few months ago, wrote a story with this headline, quote, Yellowstone wolves thrive inside the park, but here's why many don't survive after crossing the border. Sterling Burnett, you are a hunter. You're the wild man of Texas. So which is it here, man? Is climate change, which is our fault, starving the wolves, or would climate change reduce or increase the prey that they have so they wouldn't starve? I can't keep this all together.
It's nature. It is human interference in wolf populations. Let's go back a little over 2 decades, almost 3 decades now. There weren't wolves in Yellowstone because we extirpated them across the whole region. That we used to have something there called the Rocky Mountain gray wolf. It was a smaller wolf, less dense bones, less caloric intake need that existed there at one time. And they said, we need wolves back. Why? After they wiped out the wolves so they could have lots of elk and deer and buffalo for visitors to see at the park, they grazed stuff to the ground. They destroyed streams. There was overpopulation. So they went to Canada, got different kinds of wolves, put them in Yellowstone, and they did what wolves do. They took the population down. There were more than 100,000 elk in Yellowstone 30 years ago. It's down to 19,000 today. Well, if you have a lot fewer elk, it's called predator-prey relationships in ecology. You have boom and bust cycles. When a prey species booms, then the predator species booms, and there's a bust, and both populations decline to a stable level until the prey species booms again. Now, as far as climate change in Yellowstone, which is in Montana, not the warmest state in the United States, by the way, temperatures there haven't changed very much. The nighttime lows have gone up a bit. It's not quite as cold as often as it used to be, but it's no hotter. So the heat isn't, it's wiping out species. No, in fact, it should be benefiting the wolves. It's easier to hunt when there's less snow and ice on the ground. It is, you find a problem, something you think is a problem. You say it has to be climate change because we know climate change is going on and it's doing everything bad. And then you just make up the stuff to make it fit, the narrative fit, except the narrative doesn't fit. It's a different species than existed there naturally. They've been very successful. They say, they're not doing well outside the park. No, they are doing well outside the park. There's larger populations of wolves in Montana, Wyoming, Idaho. It's spread to Washington State, Oregon, and California, where they weren't where they said they wouldn't spread, down to Colorado. They're doing well. So well, in fact, that they're killing a lot of livestock, and we've implemented hunting seasons in some of those states. So It's just in the isolated population of Yellowstone, which, you know, you want them to stay in the park, that their numbers have gone down. And my suspicion is they'll go back up again when the prey species recover again.
It's puzzling to me why, I mean, I guess why like an article like this wouldn't discuss how you can't expect a animal that's following like a migratory prey species wouldn't also migrate around and leave and stuff. You know, we have so much more development now than we did, you know, 200 years ago, when these critters were wandering all over the Great Plains and in the Rocky Mountains and stuff. And during that time, you know, the buffalo, herds of millions of buffalo would eat a whole entire region down to nothing and then move on. And the wolves would follow them, other critters would follow them, the Indians would follow them. And then as they left the area where they, you know, had eaten it all down, it would grow back again, with new, you know, young growth, no old growth when they're trampling it all. But it was a dynamic ecosystem. And so now you have a situation where they want to preserve the park in a particular way. They don't want it to change the way it would naturally, because that's just part of how that type of ecosystem works. They don't want it to change. So they're trying to like kind of half manage it to keep it in a particular way, but they don't want to be too aggressive about culling, you know, the prey animals and stuff to keep those numbers appropriate. And so they're in this like weird whiplash where they're trying to maintain things rather ineffectively, it seems. But you have to be really aggressive with management if you want something dynamic to stay put.
That's the problem with all of ecology, is people pick a point of time, a certain state of an environment, of an ecosystem, and they say that's the ideal ecosystem. That's what it should be for all time. That's not how ecosystems work. They don't reach climax states and stay there. That's not science. What they do is they evolve over time, and the environmentalists say, oh no, the ideal is X state. I don't know if it's the 1860s or the 1740s or the 1600s before, you know, the 1400s before Europeans made landfall, the ideal state. Maybe it's the Ice Age, but they have a vision for what the ideal state is. And it's the idea is that somehow we can keep it in that state for all time. And that's natural. And then they try and sell that as natural. It's not natural.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we keep an eye on that. I mean, it's the bottom line for all these stories is that it's all our fault. But they contradict themselves in their own stories, and then they contradict stories that they wrote just a few months ago. And nobody else is going to notice. We're going to notice. You're not getting away with this, guys. So we'll be back again with that stuff next week. All right, let's move on to another item here. This is a serious topic, but I think it's a very unserious examination of that topic, and it's linking domestic violence to climate change. This comes from I've called it a cold and violent report. This comes from the Journal of Development Economics. The headline on their study is Frosty Climate, Icy Relationships, Cold and Intimate Partner Violence in Peru. I'll read a little bit from the summary here. Violence against women, in particular, intimate partner violence, is a health concern for women across the world. We study the effect of cold exposure on IPV, intimate partner violence, among Peruvian women. Using a data set that matches women to weather exposure, we find that cold shocks increase domestic violence 10 degree hours below -9 Celsius, increases the probability of experiencing domestic violence by 0.5 percentage points. These effects are larger for more extreme temperature thresholds. The people who wrote this say they provide evidence that cold influences domestic violence through two main channels. First, extreme cold reduces income. Second, extreme cold limits time spent outside of the household, potentially increasing exposure of women to violent partners. To our knowledge, we are the first to measure relative significance of these two channels by using variation in cold timing to distinguish shocks that affect domestic violence through changes in income from those who act through time spent indoors. Now, that's very terrible news, but I think it's also ridiculous.
Yeah,
Lois,
it is.
I guess maybe there's some good news here, Lois, because in a warming world, which we're experiencing now, women will less likely to be beaten by their husbands. I don't know.
Well, yeah. I mean, if this is all true, it's so ridiculous, and you just know, don't you, that some sort of woke department of government, either your government or my government or some stupid Western government, has paid probably £500,000 to whoever did this study, because it's the kind of ludicrous headline that you hear about, the impacts of LGBTQ on capitalism or net zero or something. It's just so stupid. But actually, as a woman that has very sadly a long time ago been in a quite serious domestic violence situation, I actually find this really insulting that someone would do such a ridiculous study and trivialize what women go through in domestic abuse situations every day. So, these people probably see themselves as good people. Those on the wokey left tend to. But I actually find, and I don't get offended ever, I don't. But actually, on this particular thing, this is pretty offensive. I was hospitalized. The person that did that to me went to prison. I still have injuries 15 years later from it. So, I am actually, for the first time ever, offended by something. How dare they trivialize this in this silly way?
Yeah, I would think that of the reasons domestic violence occurs in homes, no matter where you live in the world, I would think climate change would rank about 1,028th on that list of reasons that such tragedies occur.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is one of those things where the climate alarmists want it both ways. I have seen dozens of studies, research, headlines that say heat makes people more violent and causes domestic violence.
Yeah.
So when you're hotter, you're more violent, and when you're colder, you're more violent. But whatever it is, it's climate change.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is a classic case. It's a peer-reviewed version of the classic catch-22 question. Have you stopped beating your wife? I mean, seriously, it's they've got it both ways going on here. You're right, Sterling. But, climate change, they blame everything on climate change. I mean, I can't even imagine how you can get to this, but people make these giant leaps of logic or illogic, if you will, to come up with these papers. And well, it's just like Ehrlich said, it's peer reviewed, it must be true. So
I'd like to see the data.
It's a sad state of affairs.
I'd like to see the data on the temperature change down there to see whether temperatures in the region they studied had really changed that much.
Yeah. Go ahead, Lois.
Sorry, Jim. I'm going to go real quick here. I will say that this is a very interesting type of study. We were covering just yesterday, working on a climate realism post about a study that was trying to attribute like deaths due to inactivity, or like, someone gets heart disease or something because they don't exercise enough, to climate change. And what's astonishing about these is that they are combining two sciences that have some of the worst replication rates ever, and that's like human health and psychology and stuff when it comes to the domestic abuse stuff and the climate. So it's a double whammy, as Anthony would say, of just non-science.
Yeah, and not to, obviously, the reason this is, we highlight this study and others like it, although we've never talked about connecting climate change to domestic violence. And I've known Lois Perry very well, and I did not know what she confessed on our show today. Very brave for you to do that. And I think that puts a lot of perspective on this topic. But it's this idea that if you connect climate change to literally anything, you can get a grant to pay for your salary and make a study. And to pick out domestic violence and to try to connect climate change to it, as you said, Lois, is insulting to all victims of domestic violence. And it's also unscientific and BS.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, shame on. I've said this a few times today, actually. Shame on them. That
Yes.
seems to be my catchphrase for today.
It is. We'll have T-shirts made. We'll put it in our merch store when we
Yeah.
ever get a merch store on this channel. All right.
The problem is, these people have no shame. That's the problem.
No, they don't. No.
That is a problem. All right,
So,
we'll move on to
I
our
wanna-
next one here. This one is a lot lighter in subject. There's an animal bridge to nowhere. This story kind of went viral on social media this week. The story, lots of stories about it, but here's from the New York Post. California's priciest bridge is in SoCal and costs $114 million, but it's not for cars. California's most expensive bridge isn't for cars or humans. It hasn't been finished and has already cost more than $100 million. The Wallace-Annenberg Wildlife Crossing, which rises above the lanes of the 101 freeway in Los Angeles County mountainside suburb of Agora Hills, was pitched as a once-in-a-generation conservation fix. A lush, living bridge designed to reconnect wildlife cut off by freeways and sprawl. While some call it visionary, others call it a multi-million-dollar gamble. Either way, the cost is very real and still climbing. The project, once slated to cost $92 million, it's bad enough, has now surged up to about $114 million, a $21 million overrun. The timeline has also been blown out, as expected to be finished in 2025 to late 2026, really now at the earliest. We have a video because we're going to play the video. It just says X downloader stream there, and I didn't get a chance to label it. But this was the idea of Gavin Newsom, and this is the person that he put in charge of putting this project together and over the finish line.
Agora Road, so that the animals will not touch pavement at all. And what you're going to be seeing here is dirt Phil be putting in, but also these utility lines you see have to be underground and relocated for us to finish. That's a part of the project a lot of people don't know about. That is a part that we are paying for as part of the project, which is to underground electrical transmission lines, which will make this area more fire resilient, along with other utilities such as the main water line to Calabasas, which we are also paying for an upgrade.
With that.
There's some telecom, there's also a gas line. Once those are all underground and buried, we will then begin building the structure over Agora Road to connect it to the landscape.
Oh, did we get to see the CGI animals? I sure hope so.
Santa Monica Mountains for the rest of the world. It's amazing to watch this take place. When we started,
I'm just going to pause it right
offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
Sure. She is holding when I want my tax dollars responsibly shepherded, I want that shepherd to be holding a stuffed animal of a cougar in their left arm, because then I know that my money is going to be very well spent. By the way, that woman, she in her resume, she brags about being a graduate of Al Gore's Climate Reality Project.
Oh, wow.
And you might also notice that bridge leads straight down from the mountain habitat right into a subdivision where people live. So I guess they're going to set up a snack bar for mountain lions as well. Linnea, what do you think?
I'm so happy you went to me on this, Jim, because I have thoughts about this project. So this is a cute idea, right? You put a bridge so that the deer and the mountain lions, I guess, although how many mountain lions are really getting hit by a car? There might be some mountain lions that have been hit by a car before, but I do think, it's a sweet idea. I'm sure that it's been done before, but it is classic California to begin a project like this with no plan in place on how to finish it and how to fund it to finish it. And to be ready for unexpected cost increases, which is what they're dealing with now. This is totally bogus. I think the animal bridge idea is cute, and it sounds like maybe it could work for some animals, but deer are deer. Deer are still, they're going to walk right into that highway anyway, and they're going to stare those headlights down. Deer are not smart enough to go and use these bridges. I'm not very convinced that these things work, especially when it's just like one in the middle of nowhere. Maybe, but I don't think so. So this is something that's not going to get finished. It's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and the animals are not going to use it.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk. So we know the power lines, the water lines, all that has to go underground. I guess the subdivision will have to go underground as well. So it won't be in the way. Look, if what's pretty smart about hunting? Bears and cougars. If this became a corridor traffic for deer, they would be perched there. They'd be waiting to spring as the deers came across this bridge. And my suspicion is the deer would learn pretty quickly to avoid that bridge because it's a trap for them. In the end, $114 million. I asked an ecologist once, how much should we spend to save a certain bird? And he said, whatever it takes. Well, I wonder how much affordable housing could have built with $114 million. How much health care for the poor could have been provided with $114 million. We haven't saved one deer yet over years. It's going to get high. The cost, Linnea's right. The costs are going to rise, just like the train to nowhere out in California. And the enormous waste of resources on this is tragic.
Anthony?
Yeah. I did some research. I was wondering what that T-shirt was that she was wearing. She has this T-shirt that says, "I miss P-22." And I'm thinking, well, what is that? So I looked it up, and it turns out that P-22 is a puma that they call the Hollywood cat, which apparently, a lot of people made a big ado about. It was in the San Diego Zoo, but they called it the mountain lion of Hollywood, and it's become its own little, cult. And so the thing, it finally died, but the cause of death was euthanasia, not getting on the highway. And it's just bizarre that this woman would wear this T-shirt about this cougar that died in captivity while trying to make a land bridge to protect the cougars out there. It's just, it's even got its own Wikipedia page.
And why was it in captivity? Because it was eating too many rich people's pets.
I don't know.
And threatening their kids.
Yeah, I lived in Southern California in Los Angeles County for 5 years, from 2005 to 2010. And I'll tell you what, the condition of the highways out there, $114 million could be spent a lot better on the roads in Southern California. It's just the idea that you need to spend $114 million for a land bridge for animals. I mean, don't you just need to, the engineering on that does not have to be that complicated. I know these, and people in the comments have noticed they've seen land bridges for wildlife in their neck of the woods and everywhere. And it should only cost, maybe $1 million. But here at $114 million, and it's still not done.
Send in the Army Corps to do it, right? In Ukraine and Russia right now, they're bombing bridges and they rebuild them the next day. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I get from watching that video, just very briefly, Jim, I'm just embarrassed that woman actually does have the vote, because no wonder we're in so much trouble. If you've got women, walking around holding stuffed animals, building these bridges, as you say, it is a nice idea, but all that money on these ludicrous projects, I mean, there's so many other ways that money could be better spent. There really is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, voting is bad enough. You said it, not me, but she's in charge of stuff. She's the boss.
Yeah. She's in charge. Worse. But just for the record, I don't mean womankind. I mean her in particular.
Oh, okay. All right, we'll have to make that another topic for another day.
Okay.
All right. One last little fun item here. At least it's funny from this side of the Atlantic Ocean. Should pubs be serving warm beer for the sake of net zero? This is from GB News, which I know you're a big fan of, Lois. Ed Miliband's new tool says pubs should switch off beer fridges to save money on energy bills. Ed Miliband has unveiled a government-backed energy advice tool which could help hospitality businesses cut back on energy bills. The Energy Secretary is recommending that pubs serve their beer at warmer temperatures and switch off bottle fridges during overnight hours to reduce mounting costs. The Department of Energy Security and Net Zero's new online advice tool suggests that firms avoid unnecessary electricity use by switching off bottle fridges overnight. It also suggests monitoring energy hotspots, including extraction systems, ovens, and lamps. Fears are growing that more pubs could be forced to close as energy bills rise. Lois, when the hell are the people of Britain going to rise up en masse against net zero? If warm beer in the pubs won't do it, nothing will do it.
Well, it's interesting actually because there was all this controversy recently about extra taxes that were being put on pubs and hospitality, and what the pubs united in the whole across the whole of United Kingdom did was they banned every single Labour MP from any pub in the UK, and we got and actually it was very clever because no Labour MPs, who obviously like a few bevies like we all do, could go to their local pub or indeed any pub, and the actual tax increase was reversed. So I'm just wondering whether they could rise up again. But I mean, I don't know if you have this word in America, but one of the words that we have to describe an absolute idiot is a tool. So the only tool in this whole exercise is Ed Miliband himself. But Nigel Farage actually said the other day, they just called on the ludicrousy of this and said, I tell you what, Mad Ed, we call him Red Ed because he's a proper dyed-in-the-wool communist. But he said, I tell you what, Ed, how about we decrease energy prices? Well, how about we frack? How about, we take all of the green levies off bills and all of the other stuff so that we can make it affordable to have electricity like America, like other countries. So rather than have warm beer. Jesus, they really do not get the electorate, this Labour government. But to be honest, the Tories weren't much better. So yeah, hopefully the pubs will do a two-fingered salute to Red Ed.
I thought that they sort of liked warm ale anyway over there.
No, we don't.
You're talking about one way to lose customers and is to make them drink at home because they can only get cold beer at home.
Yeah.
Right. So that's going to save the pub. And then at the same time, I read recently where they are, for cultural reasons, wanting to close pubs and transition them to other types of venues to make immigrants from countries that don't like drinking and revelry comfortable in the countryside. Let's close some historic, hundreds of years old countryside pubs because immigrants from countries that don't like drinking feel uncomfortable there.
It's ridiculous. And there was also talk about the reason that certain people from certain communities were uncomfortable because there were dogs in the countryside. To be honest, lockdown did the job for them anyway. We lost nearly half of our country pubs during the lockdown, and with all these excess taxes and things like that. So no, I don't know. I seem to be talking a lot. I'll shut up in a minute. But just very briefly, there's this new legislation that's gone through Parliament, which is being described colloquially as the banter bill. And what that means is that if anyone says in your place of work, for example, if you or I had a conversation where we criticise transgender ideology or net zero or even the Prime Minister, the landlord himself would be held responsible if any of his employees were offended by what we said. I mean, who can run a pub or indeed any establishment when you're responsible for the words, the hurty words that other people say in your pub? It's just, or even Orwell couldn't have imagined this. Even Orwell would say, what the hell? He would.
Yep.
It's just crazy.
So, do you have anything to say, Linnea? Anthony?
No, I'm talked out on this one. All I can, well, I do have one thing. Yes, there are certain kinds of beers that are good warm, but not every beer, particularly lagers, are
Yeah,
not
lager,
good
no way. Yeah.
warm. And so, the environmental movement, everything seems to be about restricting something. We've got to take this away to save the planet. You can't do that because if you don't stop doing it, the planet's going to be killed. It's always about taking some personal liberty or product or service or something away from you. And that's why the environmental movement is tanking right now. I mean, you look at the numbers on what people think about net zero and climate change and so forth, they're tanking. The only people that think it's got any value are the politicians because they've been brainwashed and they don't look at actual data.
How dare you?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Taking away taking away your cold beer. Actually, before we move on, and we have a couple of videos we're going to play, Lois, you can fill us in on what you had done earlier today. But you said that you don't know if in America, if we have the term someone being a tool.
Yeah.
We do have
Oh,
that.
you do? Oh, you do? Good. Okay.
And then we know that this is the two-finger salute, which is the middle
Good,
finger
you know that
in
as
the
well.
United States.
Excellent.
Right, so we know that. But there's a podcast I listened to called Podcast of the Lotus Eaters. Actually, you may be familiar with it as well.
Yeah.
And they went off on somebody the other day, and they kept using the term. Gosh, I hope I'm not going to swear in several countries. Nonce, a nonce. What is that?
A paedophile.
Oh, great. I am very sorry I asked. Okay, let's move on.
I'm sorry, I was trying to think of a polite way to say it, but there isn't one. So there you go.
You needed to think harder. Okay, that's my fault. That's on me. Moving on. So
swiftly on.
Yeah, Jess, we'll have to edit that out. Anyway, so you were on you were invited on a panel kind of last minute, and you participated in that a little bit earlier today. We have a couple of clips here, and you can see here. Thank you, Andy, for putting that up on screen. You can see here there are four gentlemen to your left, a very polite host, actually, female to your right.
No, she's got the biggest show on GB News. And she was the one that invited me. Yeah,
fantastic. So let's actually. Andy, can you play Lois? To Lois, that was the first one I picked up, but it was a no. What's right? It's fine. It's just fine. Go ahead and hit play. Let's listen to this, and it has captions because the audio is a little wonky.
I agree with absolutely everything that you just said there. I was having a look here at the actual cost economically. So since 2007, the UK economy has grown by 21%, behind the US at 37%, and Australia at 57%. We have the largest cost of industrial energy of any country in the entire world. But that doesn't matter because we've completely de-industrialized. And why have we been able to do that? Because, as you say, China has picked up the burden for us. We are the only country in the G7 that can't produce virgin steel. Shame on us. And that's because we've exported all of our industry over to China. Yes, Nigel Farage does see that, and he's not seeing an electoral opportunity, because actually, when I first started campaigning, the vast majority had bought into this nonsense, right, okay? So actually, he really believes in this. He wants to re-industrialise the UK, and ultimately re-industrialise the West. Can I just finish, please? The other thing that I want to say is, you talked about, I know you're there. It's fine. I know you're there. Put your hand down. Right. It might be like Lisa wearing these glasses. I don't know. But anyway, it's fundamentally racist to deny developing countries access to fossil fuels. How dare we in the West tell other countries that haven't got electricity, where the girls can't do their homework after school because they can't plug in a light? How dare we? Find that funny, do you, about girls not being able to go to school? Matthew, okay, can I just finish my point?
Excuse me, you're lecturing. You're not making a point.
Because
excuse me, one second.
No.
Excuse me, 1 second. You're lecturing, you're hectoring, you're not making your point. And with respect, you chose to gratuitously throw the R word.
Well, that's her fault, and she's entitled to.
She is, and I don't have to listen to her.
No, you don't. That's absolutely right. But she's also entitled to have her fault.
She's been talking non-stop for the last 5 minutes.
No, she hasn't. In fact, everyone's had quite an equal amount of speech. And I think that's a bit ridiculous.
I think I just want to agree with you.
Well, it's up to you. You're entitled to your opinion, but she's entitled to hers. All right, so...
Can I go to correct something?
Oh, come on.
Sorry, I just want to correct something actually, because you don't think this is Matt from Nigel Farage and Richard Tice, and you just made him Lewis. So this thing about
Yeah, he's a bit boring on this bit. It's fine.
Yeah, we can stop it there. I meant to cut that a little shorter anyway. But Lois, so this is the CC forum. What is this, and why was that and other men on this panel so damn angry at you?
Well, so his name is Richard Quest, and he's one of the main anchors on CNN. I don't think they're used to having anyone, and especially not a loud blonde Essex girl, questioning their narrative, and he couldn't bear it. He couldn't bear it, and in actual fact, the way that he behaved towards me, I don't know if you noticed, actually. Everyone went silent. Everyone went silent. So even the people that were on his side of the argument thought, wow, because he actually turned puce at one point. I think people thought he was going to have some sort of, medical issue. But no, he couldn't cope with there being a difference of opinion. And as I say, the amount of people that came up to me afterwards saying it was so refreshing to hear a different side of the argument. So the climate conference is very funny, actually, because it's the only place, it's one of the only places conferences that you can go. Obviously, it's a very pro net zero, wokey thing, but you get corporates, you get the CEOs of big corporate companies that have to do all this stuff, but you also get hippies and former hippies and the heads of all these non-governmental organizations as well. So you'll have a man in a suit standing there who's next to a woman today that had an American Indian headpiece on, and she was not American, she was not Native American Indian, with her face painted. She was a middle-aged white woman. She probably come from, I don't know, some sort of village, Tunbridge Wells in England or something. But yeah, it was interesting. I did go into the Lion's Den, but the reason why I felt okay to do it, although I would have done it anyway, is that Nana Queer is she's on our side of the argument, although she was very balanced and very professional, and I love her to bits. So I agreed to do it last minute, and I'm really glad I did. Actually, I'm really glad that I did.
And you can tell that she literally came from that show to our show. She's wearing the same outfit, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I'm really into this sort of gothic thing. My daughter's got me into this show on Netflix called Wednesday. So I'm loving the Morticia vibes. I'm really into that at the moment.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on that appearance at last minute.
Thank
and you killed him. I mean, we have a second video. I don't, maybe you can skip that one, but we might actually be able to find. I know that your team over there in the UK is working on getting the full video, and if we find that, we'll share that with people, because it was really 4-on-1 there, and I felt bad for the 4 because you were wiping the floor with them, and that's just typical. It's like they gang up on you. It's like, part of the point of that is that they are not used to hearing articulate, science-based counter arguments. They just aren't, whether they're in the media or they're scientific or they're scientists or what have you.
No, they're not, and I think you said something earlier, and I abhor people that play the girl card, and I never play the girl card. But I think if I'd been a man saying the same things, he would have ripped into me just as harshly. But you said something about the optics not looking good, and he was having a quite full on. It wasn't an argument, was he? Attack on me and Nana. Obviously, Nana's black. We're both girls, and it just didn't look that good, did it? It just didn't look that good. So, but as I say, she'd never play that card. I'd never play the girl card, but the optics aren't great, are they?
Yeah. True. Well, you know what is great? What's great is the sponsor of this program, and that sponsor is Advisor Metals. Not my best segue, but we'll continue. If you listen to a lot of conservative shows, as I just mentioned that I do, you hear tons of pitches for buying gold and silver and other precious metals. There are so many companies out there that provide this service, but we want to tell you why you should trust our sponsor, Advisor Metals, and that's the man who runs the company, Ira Brashatsky. He is the managing member of Advisor Metals, and Ira does not employ those high pressure tactics and other deceptive marketing ploys that you see from Big Gold. He also doesn't deal in so-called rare coins. When you buy gold and other precious metals from Advisor Metals, you are dealing in quality bullion, and that is so much better for you when it comes time to liquidate this very valuable physical asset. And when you buy from Advisor Metals, you're going to have your investment sent directly and discreetly to your very home. I want to note that Ira is advertising on this program because he is an America First patriot and a climate realist. He does not donate to Democrats and other left-wing organizations. He refuses to work with proxies of the Chinese Communist Party, and he, like us, abhor the machinations and schemes of organizations like the World Economic Forum and the United Nations. That is why we are proud to have him as a sponsor. So if you want to diversify your investment portfolio or back up your IRA with real physical bullion of precious metals, go to climaterealismshow.com/metals, or you can also scan this QR code right here on this screen. If you leave your information there, Ira and his team will make the process so easy for you. Again, climaterealismshow.com/metals, and be sure to tell them who sent you, because that helps us in this program while you're helping your financial future. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And an hour and 5 minutes into this podcast, let's get to everyone's favorite, Linnea with the Q&A. Take it away, Linnea.
Those little cartoon cretins. All right. So I want to start off our Q&A. So one, guys, if you have questions for Lois or any of the panel, you can put it in the chat on Rumble and YouTube. And I believe we also get the Facebook and X.com comments to our feed as well. So I'll try to grab as many of them as I can. It depends. Sometimes X doesn't work, but sometimes it does. So give it a shot. I want to address first a question that I actually received in email this week from our dear friend David, who is a supporter of the Heartland Institute and has been for a long time. So hello, David from Florida, who asks, because of Heartland's success, is it time yet to tweak the podcast name to the Science Realism Show? I know America has to keep our guards up, but my family would love for you to broaden your impact to dispel other aspects of fake science. Guys?
Well, we talk about all aspects of climate change, and sometimes that goes over into other areas of science, biology, today, for example, with land bridges and all that sort of thing. I don't know, it might be something to think about, because the climate change hoax is on the way out. So maybe we do need a new name, just to kind of keep our horizons broad for the future. But that's really a call that's above my pay grade.
I'm gonna say probably not anytime in the near future, because the climate change hoax, as far as I can tell, is not on its last legs yet. It will be around for years, even if someone in line with Trump is elected the next presidency. They're not going to give up, and none of us on here work on healthcare. None of us on here work on chemistry. We're not physicists. So we're not going to challenge, it's not in our wheelhouse to take on all science, false science discrepancies. I think we're probably going to stick to what we know.
Yeah. And I would just add that I don't think we're going to need to change the name of this show for the rest of my life, because of the amount of money that is involved in the climate alarmist movement. It is hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion at least, just in the private donations, because they are trying to rig the system for their own communist planned economies. And so that is not going away anytime soon. And the need to understand the science of climate will also never go away. So.
I will say he's right, though, that it's important to recognize that it's not just in climate change where the science has been perverted. I have read that, I thought I read, I could be wrong about this, but something on the order of half the peer-reviewed medical journal studies have had to be withdrawn or revised after it was found they were wrong, that they were either flat out lies, fraud perpetrated upon the journals, or they just didn't know how to do their math and their research. And if that's true in healthcare, my suspicion is it's true across all sorts of disciplines. But I'm just not. I'm not a cancer researcher, so I can't refute bad cancer science.
Can I just say? Oh, sorry.
Lois, please.
Yeah, can I just say that on the clip we didn't show, but I'm going to upload it onto the Heartland UK and Europe thing later on. I actually said, and it was quite good because it drew a gasp from the audience, and I wanted to start with something that drew gasps. And so I said that basically every single person in that room needs to review their situation, because the corporates need to review their strategy, and the NGOs need to start looking for other jobs. Because I said that we advise, the Heartland, me advise Nigel Farage, and when he's Prime Minister, he's going to take away all the subsidies and abolish all net zero policies. So you all need to be looking for alternative employment. And you could hear the audible gasp in the audience, and yeah, so that did get the reaction that I wanted. I sort of set the scene, but it is true. It's like with you guys, what you've done. I mean, a lot of the money for these organisations, for these unis and stuff, was coming centrally, I imagine, and a lot of that's been cut off now. Is that correct in America?
Well, the Big Beautiful Bill cut off future funding. It didn't cut off.
Okay.
You know, if you already had a contract, and it staggered it, so they've got like a year, 2 years to start their projects and have a certain percentage done, and if so, they can continue to claim the tax credits. But after that, it goes out. But heck, I'll be honest, we'll see if that sticks after Trump, because the tax credits for all sorts of green energy have run out previously in the past, and then they've been renewed via omnibus bills.
Okay.
So, we'll see.
Okay.
Less money is currently flowing to it than has flowed to it in the past.
Well, that's a good start.
That's true in the public sector, and it's also true in the private sector. I saw a story just this week that the oil majors have cut back their green funding by a third. Now they're still spending something like $27 trillion on green, $1 billion on green energy every year, but it's a third less than it was before. So
that's better.
All right. So from Mars Rock, he says, was Ehrlich disappointed that food production outpaced population growth and that extreme poverty has been vastly reduced?
I don't think there's any evidence that he even paid attention to it.
Well, he was certainly never asked about it by any of the media. It's the clearly he was wrong about it, and he was never held to account for it. So why would he ever?
He did
was
lose.
He disappointed?
A bet
Probably was.
out.
His ego probably. He would rather that people starve than he be proved wrong. I would think that's pretty safe to say.
To my knowledge, what he did do is he just pushed the prediction out. He said, "Oh yeah, you're right. It didn't happen," when he has been asked about it, and it didn't happen. But it's like a death cult. I was just too pessimistic. It's actually coming a little bit farther out. But he was convinced that sooner or later he'd be proven right. Now I suspect he will, because the sun's going to burn out the sky, and we'll all die. And if Paul is anywhere, he'll say, "See, I told you so."
Yes, like
What's
the
your
New York
favorite
Times said.
Sterling, supernova or a red giant?
Yeah. Well, the New York Times said that his predictions were just premature, only 5 billion years premature. No
All right. Rio Dragon says, are any of these Looney Tunes like Gore, just children following in their footsteps? Not entirely sure what this question is, but with regards to, I'm gonna assume that this question is asking, are people like Al Gore and Leonardo DiCaprio and all those other guys, are they just like following what Paul Ehrlich laid down?
Well, of course, it wasn't just Ehrlich, right? You had the Club of Rome in the early 70s. You had the whole environmental movement, right? They put the Cuyahoga River burning on the cover of Time magazine I think in 1970, as justification
That was
for.
Actually, 1969, right when the moon landing happened.
69, and as justification for the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act. And what they didn't note is that the Cuyahoga River had burned 4 or 5 previous times when it didn't make any headlines. And that the problem with the Cuyahoga River was the government allowed the pollution in the first place. They subverted private property rights that used to stop this kind of pollution and said, no, we're going to manage it because the business of America is business. And so for decades, they wouldn't let people stop pollution. And they said that we'd regulate it. And so they allowed it to happen. In the end, these people, they are the children of the early doomsayers, just like Ehrlich is the child of early Malthus. Everyone forgets that Malthus changed his views late in life, that he recognized he was wrong. He didn't come out and say, oh, yeah, we can feed people for all time. But he said, look, I was wrong. Clearly, technology changes and we're doing better than we've ever done before. Ehrlich just followed. He stopped reading Malthus after his first treatise on population. And a lot of others did the same thing.
All right. We have this question from our good friend Doug, who says, ask the dealers how many EV. This is kind of not a question, but we're going to address it anyway. Ask the dealers how many EVs are bought over the fueled vehicles. Yeah. How's that ratio going?
I saw that there was a reduction, a recent news article, there was a reduction of about 43% on the EVs. That was due to new vehicle registrations. They were tracking the DMV. So there's the number right there.
And that was 43% loss from a very small base in the first place, right? Because EVs were not, I'd be surprised if they were 10% of auto sales.
Yeah. I mean, Lois, in that we didn't play the clip from it, but I did see it. You and that panel were arguing a little bit about electricity, electric vehicles, and you know, and how that's not practical for most Britons.
Well, no, it isn't, and especially those who live in the countryside, because obviously, you know, you can't have a situation where you're breaking down all the time and unable to charge your vehicle. But yeah, the electric, even with the subsidies, even with huge subsidies at the moment in the UK, people still aren't buying electric vehicles, even with the subsidies. So that's so interesting what you were saying, that it's dropped, you know, the subsidies being removed. We've got a huge drop even with the subsidies in place. Electric vehicles are just not practical for the majority of people. And again, for the rich, and most rich people that have an electric vehicle have a normal petrol diesel car as well for any trips which are outside of their immediate vicinity. People do not trust electric vehicles on long journeys. And we still at this moment have a ban theoretically in place for petrol and diesel vehicles. I managed to get it pushed back with my campaigning that I did before I joined the Heartland. But unfortunately, the Labour government came in and they reversed it straight away. The other thing that I was able to do with the organisation that I was involved with, but that was very similar to the one that I'm with now with you guys, is we actually managed to stop them concreting over the fracking wells. We actually managed to stop them concreting them over. Again, unfortunately, when Labour came in, they were covered over with concrete. So, you know, you do what you can. You just keep pushing and pushing, but you can never rest on your laurels, never.
Absolutely. All righty. We have a... This is a funny question from one of our frequent viewers, Redneck Screw Loose, who says, wow, climate change can do anything. When is it going to make me rich?
Made all those idiots rich today.
Yeah. You have to come up with something. You have to like find a problem in your life and then attribute it to climate change and get funding for it. Maybe not under this administration, but all right.
If it does, let me in on it.
Yes, absolutely. We all need to get consulting fees on that project if you manage it. All right. Our friend Johansson says, How are the UK energy reserves doing these days?
Do you want me to answer?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, oh God, I seem to have Tourette's when it comes to talking about Nigel. I don't seem to be able to shut up about him. Maybe I need to go and see somebody about it, some sort of therapist or something. But again, he was in the media recently just saying that we've got 2 days reserves at the moment, 2 days gas reserves in the United Kingdom. And how ludicrous that we do not have any kind of energy independence, that we're still preventing new exploration licenses to be granted in the North Sea, whilst Norway it is doing it, and we're buying buying the fuel off them. It's just ludicrous. So, in answer to your question, they're not good. We've got 2 days, and I'm just embarrassed. I don't even know what to say. It's so embarrassing. There's no other word for it.
We were hoping for better news, Lois.
Sorry.
All right. And Tech asks, when will elections be held in the UK?
Well, we've got the May elections at the moment coming up. They're council elections, but the way that they're being seen, not least by, I'm going to say NF now because it's embarrassing, not least by NF, is that these are really, really going to be seen as symbolic. If Reform do well, and they're the only properly anti-net zero party at the moment in the UK, although the Tories have copied us, but they're finished now, so I won't worry about them. We're the only anti-net zero party, and it looks like we're going to sweep the board, fingers crossed, or Reform going to sweep the board in the council elections. So if they do well there, then obviously the thought is that they could win very strongly in the general election. There doesn't have to be a general election until 2027. So that is the one that decides who is Prime Minister. However, a lot of people are being told to be prepared for May 26th. So, sorry, am I going mad? No, I am going mad. Sorry, there doesn't have to be elections until 28, but we're being told to prepare for next year, potentially in May. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. We have another question for Lois from David, who says, for Lois, years ago, wasn't there also talk of banning frozen food in the UK to lower greenhouse gas emissions? Fresh food only.
Yeah, well, that was when I was little, actually. There was a children's TV a program called Blue Peter, where we were all told not to use aerosols and go around smelling because we weren't supposed to have deodorant. Fortunately, I wasn't at that stage of deodorant yet, so it didn't affect me. I was about 7 years old. But yeah, I mean, it's just ludicrous, isn't it? But now they'd say that freezing food uses electricity, so that's bad. But that fresh food means importing it from other countries, so that's bad. But that doesn't seem to apply when we're bringing over wood pellets from you guys on diesel-powered ships to be burnt in our power stations here, Drax power stations, and then apparently that's good for the environment. The ludicrousy knows no bounds. It really doesn't.
It is absolutely crazy. It's something that cracks me up every time I think about it, is the wood pellets thing. There's just no universe in which that's even efficient. It's insane. All right. Let's see. Cow Tools asks, with Trump calling climate change a scam, is NOAA still manipulating temperature data? Anthony?
I'm sorry. I was doing some research on something. What was the question again?
I've got it up on the screen for you. With Trump calling climate change a scam, is NOAA still manipulating temperature data?
Well, they are. They're still filling in temperature for stations that don't exist, that have been closed. They're still adjusting data. They're still cooling the past. All that stuff is still in place in the database, as far as I can tell. And so there's been no change in that. It's going to take a wholesale, how would I say it? They're going to have to basically clean house over there at NOAA in order to get this stopped, because these folks absolutely believe that their methodology is correct. And what they've completely missed, and what I have put out in my reports, is that there is so much bias on the surface temperature record, all towards the warm side of things, that it's impossible to use adjacent stations to filter out bad stations to any degree of certainty. And so you end up with this, hot mess of stations where all of the good stations that are actually cooler because they're not encroached upon, and there's very few of those, less than 10%, they get swamped by the gigantic or maybe ginormous warming signal from all the rest of them. So yeah, it's a real mess still.
All right, thank you, Anthony. Okay, let's see. Got a question for me from Rick Harris, who says, Linnea, do you have plans for another John Stossel piece? Perhaps. You will be kept in the loop if that ends up materializing. And Jim,
how many do you have under your belt now for Stossel? Two.
Mm-hmm. So Jim says, billions of dollars have been spent to research and prove that carbon dioxide from fossil fuel use is causing climate change. Will we ever see any significant money spent to study natural or other causes?
Well,
Anthony?
I would say probably not, because they're so wrapped up in their whole modeling culture. The funding, and Roger Pielke Sr. pointed this out, that the funding for the natural stuff completely disappeared, or almost completely disappeared, because once they got on the idea that computer models were the way forward, they didn't need to look at anything else, and so they're pretty much stuck on it right now.
The problem arose when the IPCC was formed. Sorry about that, folks. The IPCC was formed, the UNF Framework Convention on Climate Change. They directed research to study the human causes of climate change. So that once that's the directive, everyone's about CO2, everyone's about greenhouse gases. We don't control volcanoes. We don't control solar activity or cosmic rays. We don't control clouds of the oceans. If you want to focus on the things we supposedly control, that's where the money's going to flow, when that's what the government is funding.
Yep. Alrighty. We have one final question here that we're going to take, and we are going to talk about nuclear in the UK. So LT Oracle of Truth asks, does the UK have nuclear power? Drum roll.
Yes, but our capacity is pretty rubbish. We need a huge amount of investment. That is actually happening at Hinkley Point. But my understanding is that, unfortunately, instead of it being British investment, it's investment from the Chinese government. So we've got someone that's actually supporting one of the countries that our biggest allies are at war with, Iran, at the moment. You guys at war with Iran. China, massive Iran fan, and they're going to own all our nuclear, or a big chunk of our nuclear capacity. It's just insanity. So yes, we do have nuclear power, nowhere near what we should, and also it's the way that nuclear power is developed in this country, rather than having lots of small nuclear power plants which could be built very quickly and be working relatively quickly, etc., and not cost anywhere near as much to do. They're not doing. It's because there's all this money tied up in the green scam. And you would have thought, wouldn't you, that these greenies, if they really cared about CO2 emissions, would be massively pro-nuclear. But of course they're not, because that doesn't make any money for them, and their windmill scams and their solar scams, and it doesn't further the communist agenda. So yeah, the answer is yes, but sadly not anywhere near as much as we need, and sadly controlled by China. It's so depressing what's going on in England at the moment. It really is.
Well, on that happy note, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's like, that's the
Don't
one thing
worry,
you're not good at.
we've got the Heartland UK in Europe. We're going to be fine. We're going to be fine.
Yeah. Yes, that's the one thing you're not good at segueing yet, Linnea. You got to work on that. From the bad news to me, taking us out. And that'll do it for today's show. Fantastic show. We had a very high number of people watching live and so active in the chat. We love to see that. Bring friends next week. We can always have a lot of fun. Just want to remind you that the 16th International Conference on Climate Change is April 8th and 9th in Washington, D.C. Space is limited. There are still tickets left. If you want to see Lois, if you want to see Anthony, Sterling, Linnea, even if you want to see me, and the leading lights in the climate realism movement, they will all be there. As a matter of fact, EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin is going to be kicking off the entire conference on the morning of April 8th. I've known this for a little while. The New York Times did a story about this today, and they are horrified that Lee Zeldin would come to our conference and talk to us. I think you should come and see why they are so horrified, because it's going to be a great conference. So we hope to see you there. We're very proud to have Lee Zeldin as our kickoff keynote speaker. I want to thank our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFACT, CO Coalition, Climate Depot, What's Up With That, and of course, Heartland UK Europe. Thank you so much, Lois Perry, the director of Heartland UK Europe, for being here with us today. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Linnea. Thank you, Sterling. And once again, thanks to all of you out there in the audience. And we will talk to you again next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.